Welcome to the fourth episode of Shot Nostalgia, where we continue our drive back into the history of pro wrestling, most specifically WWF 1998. As you can see, your boy is solo this week. Mike Belcaster is under the weather, but he will be coming back to me next week to get ready for WrestleMania 14. But don't worry, we have all the 1998 fixing for you. And as you can see, there's a little bit of an overlay here. I got some things going on. We got Mike Tyson joining DX. Spoiler alert. We got a little picture of Kane. Want to give Kane some love. 1998 Kane is the best iteration of Glenn Jacobs, in my opinion. So we're going to get into it. And make sure you guys go to the turnbuckletavern.com to get all your needs. I'm in two places at once right now. I'm doing the ring announcing for Better Than the Best 2 Remarkable Wrestling. So I appreciate you watching this. And if you can, go on IWTV and check out Remarkable Wrestling. Use code Remarkable because it does help a lot. But today we're going to be reviewing 3 events, 3 Raws to be exact. The 2/23 1998 Raw, the 3/2 1998 Raw, and of course, it is about to be the go-home show, the 3/9 1998 WWF Raw. And of course, we got the War Zones, the last hour, but it's all the good stuff. And each week, we will continue to go through 3 events. It's been a little bit of a different pattern and a little bit of a different rhythm than the WCW season, but I do like the feedback that everyone's giving. They like that we're fitting a lot more information. And the newsletters, believe it or not, aren't as jam-packed as I thought they were. And I think everything in here is really having to do with Tyson. And I think in WCW 1996, there's a little bit more of meat on the bone with potential free agents, and Brian Pillman dominated and NWO dominated it. But we have a lot to get into with Tyson. And you know what? Why waste time? And I'm going to hit the right button this time, because last week I hit the wrong button. We didn't get to hear the new happy hour, but this week we'll definitely get to hear the new happy hour drop, because it's time to go through the newsletter with Dave Meltzer.
Happy hour.
There's Dusty, and as you know, Mike Belcaster will definitely be over here popping at Dusty Rhodes. And
you want the dirt? Guess who's got the shovel?
So Vic Venom is the arch enemy of Dave Meltzer, and you know what?
You want raw? I'll get downright nasty.
You tell him, Vic Venom. And it's time to get into the February 23rd, 1998 newsletter. And we're going to get into an unfortunate news here, and something that is all too common in the wrestling world. And it was the death of Louis Spicoli, better known as Madonna's boyfriend in the Mexican promotions, and also Rad Radford in WWF and ECW. So if you guys know Louis Spicoli, if you watched WCW back in the day, he was signed in late 1997. He became pretty much the lackey for the NWO, and he was good friends with Scott Hall, and he was dubbing himself the Real Innovator, mocking Tommy Dreamer, which was obviously Tommy Dreamer's nickname was the Innovator of Violence. Spicoli was commentating during matches. Eric Bischoff was very fond of him and really was impressing everybody, and they were calling him the Chris Farley of professional wrestling. So, you know, I think this was a high praise, and sad to see that in the newsletter here was his death, and drug related. And I think that's obviously one of the cause of concerns. Only 27 years old. Meltzer gets into it, and he says the death of a 27-year-old is a tragedy. In the aftermath, there have been more discussions about who will be next rather than what can be done to stop someone from being next. And I think any of those fans, all of us that watched the Attitude Era and we watched through Ruthless Aggression, it happened way too many times that we see some of our favorites go through this, and at a young age, and the names are countless. I don't have to go through all of them, whether it starts with Eddie Guerrero, you can go Test and Crash Holly, you know, Benoit, all the stuff that went on in the background, drugs being a focal point. And Meltzer is tackling this in 1998, where the issue only gets worse before it gets better. And I would say wrestling's in a better spot now than they were at this point, but it's not even peaked at this point. And Meltzer had it on his radar that this is something that would continue to be an issue because of steroids, because of the abuse on their bodies, and of course the partying and the alcohol abuse paired with drugs. It's just a bad mix. And of course, we're going to see a lot of bad news come down the pike. But he continues here, and he says the number of deaths of active pro wrestlers since Len Bias from causes in some form related to drug use is lengthy enough that nobody could even tally a list without a half dozen out. Drug testing is not the answer, but with many drug deaths, as there have been in this profession, eliminated drug testing, or exactly what the current drug testing systems are or aren't, is even less of an answer. Meltzer continues, we've talked about the limitations of such programs, but it's ridiculous that companies have all but dropped their drug programs as anything more than occasional lip service. There are wrestlers, some of whom have past well-chronicled drug histories that reportedly actually have it in their contracts or at least have verbal agreements that they can't be drug tested, which shows what the real bottom line on the real issue is. So it's a long piece here. He is going in deep about this, and we don't want to lose the fact that a 27-year-old with a promising future, whether it be with announcing or pro wrestling, as a 27-year-old Louis Piccoli passing away, looks at it as a wake-up call, and I think it takes many more deaths for people to actually wake up. And we always talk about this, and especially in ECW 1995, they almost glorify the backstage antics of all these talents in ECW, that it's looked at as this like what professional wrestling was, and people talk about the partying stories and all of that. But this is the darker side of it where things go awry. And I think a big piece to this, it's not just WWF, it's not just ECW, it's not just WCW, it is a worldwide thing, every profession. And Meltzer does back that up, and he says this is not a WWF problem or a WCW problem or an ECW problem. It is an industry-wide problem. The steroid policy in WCW internally by the wrestlers is considered a complete joke there as well. ECW has no policy at all, with Paul Heyman's claim always being they didn't care what guys did on their own time, as long as it wasn't out of hand and they show up to work able to perform. And he continues and ties this in with Pillman's death that we covered in WCW 1996. And he said WCW tested about a dozen or so undercard wrestlers, about 28% of whom came up positive, largely for either marijuana or steroids. And there were no suspensions, as WCW policy is for them to attend an educational class on first offense. But when such a high percentage of positives indicate a company with some serious problems and almost demand full-scale regular testing to get it under control. So yeah, I mean, this is a huge issue we're going to see, unfortunately, pop up continually in the newsletter. If we continue through 99 and then 2000, 2001, this happens way too often. And, you know, I've mentioned some guys in the beginning, but it's not just the drug overdoses, it's the steroid abuse and dying early. And we still saw the effects of that later in life, even well after they're done wrestling. You know, you point to, you know, Ultimate Warrior, like the fact that all of these guys have abused their bodies to the point by using these drugs and things like this. And I think we can safely say that wrestling's in a better spot because of the options. And we look at a guy most recently of, you know, Matt Riddle, who was just suspended for the drug abuse in the past. Maybe he would turn a blind to his push because it wasn't on their radar. So wrestling's in a better place. I wouldn't say it's perfect, obviously, but looking at it from this spot, it's unfortunate it took the death of multiple people, not just Louis Piccoli, to get this to get into people's eyes. And it's similar to the issues we saw in the NFL that continue to pop up with the head injuries. Like I think it takes public outcry and it takes people to have the conversation, but unfortunately it's too late for some of these people. But, you know, popping this up in the newsletter is very interesting because it continues to be an issue well years after this, and everyone just continues to go on. And I think the biggest thing that struck me was not about what could be done to prevent it, of just who's next. And that was really telling of Meltzer and almost chilling, honestly. So here we go with Shawn Michaels. We talked about it last week in the newsletter. His back is broken. Mike Tyson wants to give his feedback on it.
Spinal.
Yeah, Mike Tyson, it is spinal, falling off that bump. The first bump really of that casket match of the Royal Rumble 1998 against Taker was his demise. And we didn't know how badly he was hurt. And people, at this point, he's the boy who cried wolf because he had a lot of stories and he's unwilling to do business with some people.
I broke my back.
So now it's official. He's 4 days before the WWF pay-per-view, which we know to be no way out. He didn't compete. He has two herniated discs in his lower back, supposedly aggravating by weight training the previous day. So he's trying to stay active. He's trying his best to be able to get ready on this road to WrestleMania because they need him. He is the champion, but now they're actually looking at this as, damn, maybe he's not going to be able to compete at WrestleMania and put over Stone Cold Steve Austin. And they're in a really tough spot right here. So we're going to continue to talk about this. And he says the injury stemming at first from the first major bump he took over the top rope with his back cracking on a casket at ringside at the Royal Rumble in San Jose had kept him out of action to the point. And the February 15th pay-per-view was scheduled to be his only appearance in the ring before WrestleMania. And they talked about his treatment and said Michaels was treated with cortisone shots to alleviate the problem and told to stay bedridden for at least 1 week after being kept at San Antonio Methodist Hospital overnight for treatment and being released the next day. The injuries didn't even allow Michaels to travel to the pay-per-view in nearby Houston, nor the TV tapings in Dallas or Waco. We're going to cover the Waco, Texas Raw here. We're going to see a lack of Shawn Michaels in the building. Luckily, they have huge superstar budding with Triple H and also the international superstar that is Mike Tyson to carry the weight. But his absence on Raw is ever present. And we're going to get used to that absence because he's going to disappear from our TVs for 4 years. He's going to be gone. And it's probably for the better. He gets his life into better shape. He's able to, get his head right and get his body right. And we get the golden era of Shawn Michaels that we didn't think we were going to be able to get. But at this point, 1998, anything extra we can get out of Shawn Michaels, WWF just wants that Stone Cold match, and they just want him to put him over because it's not just the injuries, it's also the emotional dysregulation that he's showing in and out of the ring. So not a good thing. And WWF did release the news that he would not be appearing on the pay-per-view almost immediately on its hotline. They acknowledged it by Friday in the Houston market and on Superstar's national TV show in the morning of the pay-per-view, but they did not release the replacement of this match, teasing a surprise right until Savio Vega got into the ring to, and Meltzer said, a groaning audience. So they did hype up that it was a mystery partner, and that's the risk you run. We've seen it so many times in AEW where they say this is a mystery person, a mystery opponent, and everyone's going to be let down because you hype it up in your head. And Savio Vega, great worker, one of those guys who had a memorable feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, did fit the story to be in this match. But at the end of the day, everyone's going to think it's someone better than Savio Vega. So probably should have just announced and said Savio will be replacing him instead. But, better know now. So Michaels is expected to appear on WWF's live Raw telecast on 3-2 in Cleveland, along with Mike Tyson, and it was considered almost a definite that he would be appearing for his planned title loss to Steve Austin at WrestleMania. There was a chance that if the cortisone shot didn't alleviate the problem, the next option would be back surgery, which would put WrestleMania out of the question. But the belief was the odds were strongly against this happening. So like I said, Meltzer saying it's unlikely to happen, but there is a small chance that Shawn Michaels would not be able to compete at WrestleMania, which would be an outright disaster. And I would love to, talk to Vince McMahon and maybe Vince Russo and figure out what would have been the plan if Shawn was to not be able to defend the title. Of course, Endgame put the title on Stone Cold Steve Austin, but does it have the same effect if Stone Cold doesn't beat the champion that, let's be honest, was passing the torch? This wasn't just a title change. This was a passing of the torch moment, and they needed Shawn Michaels to do that. So it wouldn't have the same effect if it was a guy like Undertaker that was being a transitional champion, or even if you found a way to get Mike Tyson in the ring with him. It had to be Shawn Michaels, and I'm sure they were holding their breath. So with Meltzer continuing with the showstopper having been stopped, the WWF instead started teasing the dreaded mystery partner. We talked about that. And, the thing is, though, all while this is going on, people may groan in the audience, but in Houston, this set a WWF record for the city with 16,110 fans, 14,280 paying, $241,982 with an incredible $166,343 in merchandise and selling out more than a week in advance. So, and he continues, the company's lack of talent depth was exposed once again with a poor undercard and a main event promise surprise that fizzled, which a lot of people killed. That was an entertaining match before it started. As something of a consolation prize for the fans given the change, with HBK, who no doubt was expected to carry the match and logically provide a memorable ending of the picture, they turned into an ECW, FMW style garbage match, announcing the afternoon of the show that it'd be a non-sanctioned, no DQ match. And we continue with the match No Way Out. We covered it in depth last week. It was a decent match, memorable 8-man tag. They made it chaotic. That's the best thing you can do with a situation like that. And of course, yeah, you would want Shawn Michaels. You'd want the champion in that match, but they did the best thing they could. And I honestly think it's one of those lost matches. We talked about it last week. It was a very entertaining night of wrestling, and they did their best to do it. And it just also shows, Meltzer says complete lack of talent depth. That's true. As we go through 1998, we're going through each event, and the undercard is definitely underwhelming. The tag teams are underwhelming. All the other programs aside from the main event is underwhelming, but for whatever reason, this resonates with fans. And I think it's because of the top of the card. One other time in wrestling history, aside from, the early 90s with Hogan, Warrior, and Andre and all those guys being involved, are you having guys like The Rock, Taker, Stone Cold, Triple H, all these guys on the same show, 2 hours. So I think that's sort of the give and take. You can have a huge roster, and I think that's something that AEW can tout right now, that their roster is full of talent, but they don't have those transcendent stars. Meanwhile, WWF 1998, they probably had about 6, which is insane to think about. So the other thing we talk about the Attitude Era is always the signs, right? Because the signs are something that always come to pass where everyone looks at this, like what happened to the signs, who's writing on the signs. As they do the open for Raw, they pan the crowd and there's a million signs, but the signs that got left at the door were actually funny. And Meltzer talks about they were confiscating signs at the door of No Way Out, mainly for lewdness. And some of the signs in here are hilarious to think about. He said, although some made it past the censors were, and I quote, Rock has no cock. I saw Sable's breast, Sable 32D, and Bring Back Brett. And although she didn't work, Jacqueline, aka Miss Texas, was at the show, and she'll probably get in a shot. Although you think if Marlena comes back, they already have too many women running around to begin with. Interesting, because Jackie does play a huge part of the Attitude Era, one of those memorable moments. To go back, I think it was Fully Loaded 1998. I think that we're going to be covering that in July, where Sable wears that, now famous bathing suit, and Jacqueline wears the same. I think they have 2 action figures based on that. Mike Belcaster can speak a little bit more clearly to that. But one of those moments as a 10-year-old boy watching, cannot believe I'm watching this, but here it is. And they kept showing highlights, and WWF Magazine was a must-have for that month. And they also continue talking about, this was very interesting to put in here. We've been talking about that NWA angle with Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express and everything going on. And I'm glad this didn't happen, because they're going to be reviving the Midnight Express tag team. And Meltzer says, I believe it'll be Bob Holly and Bart Gunn, who it winds up being. They're going to be debuting in the WrestleMania 14 Battle Royal. But by chance, that box of gimmicks that they always talk about, it could have been Adam Copeland and Sean Morley. And we don't know what they're going to be at this point. Adam Copeland, as you know, goes on to be Edge. Sean Morley goes on to be Val Venus. 2 very important characters. Adam Copeland being more important, obviously. But Val Venus was important to what they were doing in 1998. Intercontinental champion, tag team champion, European champion. But Adam Copeland, I'm sure his talent would have overcame. But if he would have debuted in this Midnight Express, who knows where the career path would have went. And maybe we'd be without Edge if for some reason they didn't want Bob Holly and Bart Gunn doing this. And we'd be looking at a completely different wrestling history. And that's like the butterfly effect we always talk about. But going to the March 2nd, 1998 newsletter, they are trying to negotiate a 3-show deal with Mike Tyson, which would all take place before July. Obviously, the 3-2 Raw is going to have to be one of the hottest, with Tyson and Shawn Michaels having to do some sort of angle, likely an Undertaker return, and possibly during the Steve Austin Kane TV main event, we'll get Taker. But of course, we'll talk about that, not burying that lead. Not just yet. And we also had Vince McMahon being on TSN's Off the Record. Triple H, Chyna, and Doc Hendricks were on the show on 220 as well. And the subject of the Survivor Series finish came up in both conversations with both guests. And Triple H claims neither he or Shawn Michaels knew about the finish being changed ahead of time. And while we don't know what Triple H did or didn't know, it's pretty well come to light from several sources that Michaels did know. He admitted Michaels was broken up and near tears at the end of the match, but not because he was afraid Hart would attack him, but because he was afraid of the reaction of the dressing room, because they would all think he was in on it. Doc Hendricks, a.k.a. Michael Hayes, repeated the long-since discredited story about McMahon doing what he had to do because of the fear Hart would appear on Nitro the next night in Memphis with the WWF title belt. Meltzer continues to talk about that. But, we forget we're so close to November 1998. Think about November of this year. That Survivor Series, War Games, Sami Zayn. That's where we're at this point in March. So that's the time difference. It's not that far away that this just happened. Vince McMahon, the character, was born the next night. The black eye on TV. Brett screwed Brett. The whole thing. But I don't know. It feels like time moves a little bit slower in this era where everything seems like it's so spread apart, but it really wasn't. So we're still fresh off of this. It's still a topic of conversation on talk shows. It's not like this is a dying rhetoric that's been going on throughout WWF, and it's something they've been dealing with, because it's not just the company's at the highest it's ever been, but there's a lot of distrust that's been bred because of that situation, and that can't be disputed. So obviously it's going to pop up in the newsletter continually. We also have Ahmed Johnson, which feels like everybody talks about missed opportunities, what could have been. This guy's a former IC champion, feels like he would look like $1 million, but Tony Norris shoot name Ahmed Johnson was officially released on 2/23. And there's been some incidents with Ahmed Johnson that you may or may not know. If you're well-versed in the Ahmed Johnson Wikipedia page, maybe you do know. But Meltzer goes into it and says, this stems from an incident at the TV taping on 2/16 in Waco, Texas. And he said, Ahmed Johnson had nearly 4 years remaining on a 5-year contract. And he says, it's no secret that the company wasn't happy with him between him injuring people, his own injuries, and a poor work rate. Which is interesting because 1998 is not about work rate. So imagine how bad you have to be for them to fire you based on work rate. And he continues, in addition, because of losing momentum from the injuries and losing even more steam with the heel turn and a rapid face turn back, made nobody care about him. His stock had fallen tremendously since he was originally offered the deal. And he was at one time thought to be one of the more potential top attractions in the company. He was instructed at the Dallas TV to do a job for Kurgan using the claw and refused and walked out. He never returned, missing TV the next night and his house show dates over the weekend. And Meltzer says, my feeling, given the knowledge going in, is he surely would react this way because of what was asked, not to mention being in Dallas was where he wrestled in the early part of his career. rarely doing jobs, being booked very strongly. So this is one of those things. And Norris, aka Ahmed Johnson, has since claimed to friends that he never refused to do the job, but was never asked to do the job. But he felt the company was burying him since he openly spoke on the wrong side of the fence on the touchy Survivor Series finish issue. And that's what Meltzer says being claimed. But it's very interesting to see how he's being treated here, because at one time, Ahmed Johnson, people always talk about him. He's a missed opportunity, but I think we're starting to see he's refusing new jobs. He didn't want to put Kane over. He didn't want to, didn't want to put Kurgan over. What's true and what's not, it's only being reported in here.
You want Raw? I'll get downright nasty.
Ahmed Johnson would have liked Raw, but unfortunately no longer appearing on Raw. And that's it. I think that's it for Ahmed Johnson as far as WWF. I don't think we see him at all. I'm sure he's going to be at different cons and different autograph signings, but as far as his WWF career, it's short-lived. And what was a very promising momentum-based thing that he was doing is now over. We continue. Backstage in Dallas, there was a skirmish between Sonny and Luna. Meltzer says we don't know the details other than apparently somebody said something to someone in confidence about the other one. And Luna found out what Sonny said and kind of flung her around, resulting in Sonny getting a large bruise on her back and a back injury. By the end of the night, it was all said that sides had made up and everyone was fine. And then we had in front of the camera a spot during the Luna Sable brawl where Sable popped out of her top. It was edited off TV, but apparently people who saw the show live, it was transmitted back to Connecticut via KU band satellite, did see it, and it became a hot item on the internet. We've been told it was an accident, but those who have seen the frame-by-frame of it claim you can clearly see that it wasn't. This becomes the topic of conversation. I mentioned Fully Loaded, where they had the stickies on Sable, and then obviously you go down the line. I think it was 2000 or 1999 with Miss Kitty, Mae Young. They found a way, and they want the edgy sort of appeal. They want this bad publicity in a way where people are figuring it out. And the internet was, although in its infancy, still a very important thing, increasingly important over time. And people were sharing this photo, and I'm just picturing Dave Meltzer in that famous picture in his room where it's covered in paper. You see the Lucha mask over his window. He's sitting there typing, and there he is trying to find, and it's downloading bit by bit, like the photos used to download back in the day. And I think I can see it popping through. So that's probably Dave Meltzer watching the Sable photo download on what would be the equivalent of, I don't know, Internet Explorer. I have no idea.
You want fluff? Go eat a marshmallow.
All right. Continuing down the line, John Tenta, a.k.a. Earthquake, apparently looked impressive enough that he's expected to be offered a deal, given a new gimmick, and be pushed as a potential challenger for Steve Austin's title throughout the summer. This had me excited. Then you realize John Tenta does come back, if you guys don't realize that, and he works under the Golga mask. So he had got himself back into shape. I'm a huge John Tenta fan. I think he was a very underrated big guy. Follow his background. I mean, legitimate sumo wrestler, like to the point where he was championship level. And Earthquake, one of the best bad guys. I understand he's not a fit guy. He's a bigger guy, but to me, he's one of the better characters of that age and one of my favorite Hogan opponents. You know, people writing the letters to Hogan to get well soon after he was crushed with the, Earthquake sitting on his chest. I would have been very game to have John Tenta Earthquake in 1998 WWF, but instead they went with the Golga thing, which, listen, that's fine. I know we could sit here and try to rebook WWF 1998, but it's one of those situations where why would you? It's like wrestling reached its height at this point. I wouldn't touch anything, but I would like to see a John Tenta little Earthquake push throughout and see what Vince Russo could have done with potentially doing the Earthquake character with a 90s attitude era spin and not be Golga. But, I'm not saying put the title on him. I think he would have been a good contender for a championship, maybe for a one-off and in your house. I'm not saying WrestleMania, but I think it would have been a very interesting gimmick, and it popped up here, and I'm sure we're going to see it continue on here, but interesting they put John Tenta under a mask, and maybe we'll get some background of that when he joins the Oddities and all that, coming out with the Cartman stuffed animal. I think we're going to figure that out over time, but it's certainly interesting to come back from being pushed to the main event to get down to the Golga thing. I don't know. Maybe it was his choice. He wanted to work under the mask. I don't know. And speaking of the title, supposedly it is a definite that Shawn Michaels will wrestle at WrestleMania. Within the industry, nobody believes he was injured as badly as he claims. Although at this point, even if he was, nobody would believe it. As I said before, boy who cried wolf syndrome. There were kinds of stories that when he was supposed to have been bedridden the day of the pay-per-view, he was riding around all day on a friend's motorcycle, and there was a decent shot that'll do Mania no matter what. and then take time off after Mania to rest up. What we do know is that he's done after WrestleMania 14. It's his last match until he comes back at SummerSlam 2002, that unsanctioned match against Triple H. I was live in person, SummerSlam, Uniondale, New York, Nassau Coliseum, one of the biggest highlight of my wrestling live experiences among many, but that was one of the more memorable ones. And goes on 2 months later to win the world championship in the first ever Elimination Chamber, as the Extra Cooler Boys did so great covering him wearing the shit brown pants. Didn't even realize that those tights were just unfinished. That's why I just thought that he was going for a new look. Cause I mean, the haircut was bad. Why wouldn't the tights match it with the Dutch boy haircut? Not great look for Shawn Michaels, but a very memorable run that continues all the way through. And you can make the argument that run he had from 2002 to when he was retired at WrestleMania against Taker, probably a better run than he had. I know a lot of fans will go back and watch the mid 90s and 1995 Shawn Michaels is epic. 96 Shawn Michaels, there's a certain edge to him. But as far as in-ring matches, I think back to the matches, Unforgiven 2003, when he wrestles Randy Orton. I mean, go through the list. I mean, he wrestled a lot of guys that you probably didn't think you'd get to wrestle, and he revisits that feud with Triple H. A lot of good stuff throughout Shawn Michaels' career, the second half. And it's interesting because you wonder what would have happened if he continued. And Belcaster alluded to it when we were talking about Shawn Michaels. Who knows where he would have went if he would have continued to, burn the candle at both ends, to be cliche about it. I think that's what we really saw from Shawn Michaels at this point. And worst case scenario if he would have not rested his body and continued to be in the extracurricular game of the things he was doing. I'm just happy he got his mind right, got his body right, found God, and that helped him. And then we got the best Shawn Michaels we ever got.
I broke my back.
Yeah, he did break his back, Mike Tyson. And we're going to continue in some historical notes in this that I want to mention from Meltzer. And he said, relating to the formation of WWF stemming from an answer to a question 2 weeks back. And Meltzer talks about it here. He said, back in 1963, the TV explanation about Buddy Rogers becoming the first WWF champion was not like winning a title in Brazil, as we wrote, but that Willie Gillensburg, a longtime boxer promoter who was also a partner of Vince McMahon Sr. in the wrestling business, was the figurehead president of the WWF until the late 70s, came on TV in his new role as president, said that the belt was being returned to Rogers. He continues, he gave him the belt, which was supposed to have been, and I quote, the belt, but was actually a new belt, and called him the Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion. He explained there was a disputed match in Canada that Rogers lost, which they never mentioned the name of Lou Thesz, who was never acknowledged during this period as champion on McMahon television, but said since there was a one-fall match, 2 out of 3 fall world title matches were the norm in those days, they refused to recognize the title change. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the WWE legacy of the championship is very much relevant today with Roman Reigns and the records and people he's passing. But it's so interesting to see Meltzer just really diving deep into the historical references of the championship. And I just thought it'd be fascinating to talk about it here about Bruno Sammartino. And he said, for historical completeness, it should also be noted that in Toronto, 2 weeks after Thesz won the title on February 7th, 1963, before the Thesz win over Sammartino, they had a 2 out of 3 fall match with Thesz versus Rogers, and Thesz won that one clean as well. A few weeks later, to give Rogers more credibility, they gave him a trophy for having some outlandish number of successful title defenses, like 500 or something. And the funny part about all of this is when Bruno Sammartino won the title on May 17th, 1963 in 47 seconds, it was also a one-fall match, and during Sammartino's reign, virtually all the title matches were one fall, as the WWF became the first major promotion to go to one-fall world title matches. Rogers had a few matches after that point, all lasting less than 90 seconds, which gives credence to the heart problem, which I should mention Sammartino has always disputed. And we do know Sammartino wanted to correct or add some things to the story, and will probably do next week. So anyway, as the story ends, Sammartino-Rogers match was scheduled for October 4th, 1963 at Roosevelt Stadium, and a few weeks before the match, it was announced that Rogers had retired due to heart problems, and it wound up being Sammartino versus Gorilla Monsoon instead. Very interesting. Whenever those historical things pop up in the newsletter, I want to talk about it, because in order to understand context of wrestling, you have to understand history. And no one ignored history more than 1998 WWF. They didn't give a shit about the history. But it is fascinating to read things when you see it pop up about how the world title used to be just defended 2 out of 3 falls, which I am a huge fan of. I think they should probably bring that back. Maybe people need to understand that to beat a champion, you have to beat them 2 out of 3 times. Love that. Books yourself in a little bit of a corner, but I do enjoy that. But anytime I see things like this pop up, I always want to read it, because this is only from Meltzer's mind in 1998. So very, very, very fascinating. It's still relevant to today. And we continue over here. Del Wilkes, aka, and it was funny, we mentioned him about Tom Brady stealing his gimmick, but Del Wilkes, aka the Patriot, was released due to injuries, and this actually happened quite a ways back. And then Meltzer also talks about they're trying to stock the light heavyweight division with 7 more wrestlers, 3 from Mexico and 4 from Japan. Japanese may wind up being some of the Michinoku wrestlers that work with Taka, Parada Morgan, who actually worked better than I had expected in his match in Dallas, and worked steady and made Aguilar look more polished than he is, was said to have been too heavy to work as a light heavyweight. We mentioned this before. The light heavyweight division is somewhat of a priority at this point, but it becomes clear that it's not everyone's priority because it has some focus on some Raws. It seems like Taka's getting some shine throughout these slow builds, but very quickly it becomes less about work rate. And I think that's what the light heavyweight championship's about. It's about work rate. So of course, during that time, it becomes secondary. And that's why we're not seeing a lot of these guys being pushed, but very, very interesting. And we go to the final newsletter here, the March 9th, 1998 newsletter. And we're going to talk about this on Raw, but want to hear Meltzer's take before we get into Get Your Fix. And he says, Mike Tyson joined DX, and WCW countered with this week's version of the greatest tag team match in history. Undertaker returned. Bret Hart wrestled on TV for the first time in more than 4 months. And the combined Monday night audience set another all-time record on 3-2. So wrestling is at an all-time high. We got people watching on both sides, and that's what people don't understand. We talk about tribalism in wrestling. There was a time where you're having upwards of 8 to 10 million people watching wrestling on any given night. And I understand the media landscape has changed. Entertainment options have changed, but it doesn't change that 10 million people at some nights were watching pro wrestling on TV. Whereas now everybody gets excited over 2 million on Raw or 2 million on SmackDown. And we're looking at Rampage numbers and throwing up. Looking at those numbers were disgusting on Friday. And you could blame time slots, you could blame whatever you want. But the thing is, end of the day, heights like this are never going to be reached again. And it's because of the stars, transcendent stars. You can just go down the list on both sides. There will never be another time in wrestling where you have all these stars. And, and that conversation's for another time. But I think the more you think about it, it's because of the insecurity of the promotions to build these stars, because you have to give them so much power to build their own brand. And I think, especially for WWE, I mean, you can speak about AEW, it's hard because they're still in their infancy in a small amount of time. But when you look at some of these stars in WWE, there's a hesitancy to let them become bigger, because I think as WWE sees, their biggest stars leave and go off to greener pastures, whether it be Hollywood or elsewhere, just acting in some capacity, John Cena, The Rock, those guys. And then when they leave, there's a giant hole that's left. And gone are the days they're trying to have this breakthrough star. Because I think when people see when The Rock, people forget, like The Rock, when he first became an actor and he took that mummy role and then he did the dentist movie, it was good for WWE at the time because it was like, wow, a wrestler is breaking through. And of course, it's happened in the past. Go down to Roddy Piper or Hogan. But now it's to the point where in lieu of wrestling, now they're doing these other things. And like people are using wrestling to use it as a platform to get to where they want to go. And that was never the case. Wrestling at the end of the day for The Rock was his passion, was his drive, and Hollywood just kind of happened naturally. Some people are now using WWE as a platform, and WWE's hesitant to allowing people. They want the brand to be bigger than the individual. And I think that's sort of that divide we're seeing, because we're not going to get these transcendent stars unless you put all your stock into them. And who knows, maybe with Paul Levesque in charge, you see him right in my corner over here, other way right here. Maybe his mindset will change and they'll be able to create these transcendent stars. But it's certainly going to be an interesting shift in thinking, because it's been so long since we've had those guys that can really break through. There's a reason for it, and I think it's intentional. And the combined rating that we talked about set an all-time record, with Nitro getting its second highest rating in history in a competitive situation, a 4.81 rating, 4.83 first hour, 4.68 second hour, and a 7.42 share. Raw also got its second highest rating in a competitive situation, a 3.80 and a 5.80 share. The combined rating for the head-to-head 2 hours was a record-setting 8.60, aka 6,250,000 homes. The 10 to 15 p.m. segment, in which both groups did a 4.5, we had Nitro edged Raw with 3,267 homes and 3,259,000 homes for Raw, with Raw having the Tyson angle and Nitro having Jim Duggan versus Scott Steiner versus the Nitro Girls and Mean Gene go to college drew a combined 9.0 rating and a 6,526,000 amount of homes, both all-time records for Monday Night Wrestling. Do the math on that, man. Like, if you can hit that number ever again, close to 10 million homes, crazy. So we continue talking about Mike Tyson coming to the ring, wearing jeans and a WWF shirt. We'll talk about that segment when we get there. We'll obviously talk about Austin and Kane. And on the other side, I just want to bring this to your attention because we're not going to talk about and get your fix. The Nitro main event on the same night with Sting and Randy Savage versus Hogan and Scott Hall, hyped as the first time WCW NWO joined forces as part of a tag team, wound up with almost no heat once they were in the ring, but it got people to come and watch. And this is the biggest thing about the competition on Monday nights. You're throwing people the best possible main event. I think that's what would be the old school mentality of pro wrestling was, let's save it for the pay-per-view. Let's make people want to buy the pay-per-view. But the mindset of let's just beat the competition, you gave away so much. And I think that's what Nitro ran into when you had this huge issue with WCW. They had a lack of matches left to do because they did it. They almost used every bullet in their chamber throughout the Monday Night Raw on Nitro. And a lot of times they had a better Nitro than Raw did, but slow and steady won the race. And some of the bad decisions we can get into. And you can read Death of WCW by Brian Alvarez, one of the best books you'll ever read as a wrestling fan. Absolutely fantastic. We had Nitro selling at the Spectrum well in advance with 14,254 fans paying $236,978 due to the late rush of interest due to the tag team main event we just talked about. On the same night, Cleveland sold the Gund Arena with 15,643 paying $252,393 and almost $189,000 in merchandise. And pro wrestling appears to be the hottest it's ever been and continuing to rise. It's going to reach even higher heights throughout the Attitude Era. And we're going to continue to talk about this TSN show with Vince McMahon. It's all over the public, and WWE doesn't care about publicity if it's a bad thing. They just want to be in the news. And TSN off the record, recent appearances with Bret Hart and Vince McMahon. Obviously, we talked about before in the last newsletter. And they talked about, obviously, the screw job. That was a huge point because TSN being a Canadian-based telecast. They talked about ending the 14-year business relationship with Bret Hart and Vince McMahon. And the interesting part about this was Meltzer chronicles some of the opinions that Vince has on other personalities in wrestling. I thought this was crazy to read out here, especially without the context of Future. And McMahon was asked to give quick reactions to certain names. And on this interview, again, this is on Off the Record on TSN. He was asked, what do you think about Ultimate Warrior? He says, lunatic. Eric Bischoff. And he said, I quote, don't know him that well from his reputation. Not a nice man. Hulk Hogan. And I quote, not as big as he thinks he is. Bruno Sammartino. And I quote, a confused individual suffering from dementia, but one with a great reputation. Rick Rude. And I quote, someone who would like to be in this era performing with the greats, but can't. Jesse Ventura. And I quote, overrated at the time and still confused about his place in the history of WWF. Kevin Nash. And I quote, a very fortunate individual that someone finally saw the talent and gave him the opportunity to be somebody. And finally asked about himself, Vince McMahon. And I quote, the luckiest man on earth. I've got it all. A wonderful family, the privilege of being in a company and doing what I love, which is entertaining people. It's the biggest thrill of my life apart from my family. Interesting.
You want fluff? Go eat a marshmallow.
So fascinating to read that, especially Vince McMahon 1998. So much goes down with all those different guys we see. I mean, you can go through the list here. Him and Bischoff, they go from all-time heights of hating each other, then working together in 2002. Interesting to hear Bischoff's takes now. Everybody has a podcast. 83 Weeks is definitely a good listen from Eric Bischoff. But all these other guys, Bruno Sammartino, they never quite mended that fence. I mean, Bruno was brought back in with Triple H, but I think it took a very long time to get him to the Hall of Fame. And as we mentioned, he's still the longest reigning champion in history, spanning multiple years, which will never be topped despite how much, Roman's booked. I don't think they'll ever have the patience to book a title reign like that, but I guess we'll see. But very, very interesting. We also have the 1999 WrestleMania is tentatively scheduled for Sky Dome in Toronto, which we know is not going to be true. They'll be at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia. They won't be back in Toronto until WrestleMania 18, but they obviously had that in their mind. Sky Dome being a home of WrestleMania 6. They've been there before. Precedent's been set, but they're not ready to do big shows like that again. I think they're still getting back on their feet. If you look at the difference between WrestleManias over time, I mean, the low being probably WrestleMania 12, or in Anaheim maybe, but WrestleMania 11 in Connecticut is probably all-time low as far as prestige as arena goes. But they'll work their way up, and now it's hard to even imagine them doing a WrestleMania at the Fleet Center in Boston or Wells Fargo Center in Philly, even MSG. Like MSG, there's a reason why WrestleMania 30 didn't happen at MSG, and WrestleMania 40 is not happening in MSG because they're just too big for it. We also have rumors that WWF pulled out of Nassau Coliseum, or that WCW had an exclusive on the building, were false, as WWF has a date there, 4/14 for Raw, and we'll be back on 10/12. I'd have to go through my old ticket stubs. That seems like a show I would have went to, and I can't wait to read the results and watch it and see if like this is an event I went to as a 10-year-old. Farouk missed the weekend house shows from hip injury. Legion of Doom were pulled from all house shows for storyline reason. Vader had his eye surgery on 2/24. Dory Funk's going to be doing more training camps, so maybe we'll see some more talent coming through. A lot of talent was in his last training camps. And house show business remains huge. They continue to have huge gates. 226 in Tacoma drew 10,730 fans, with netting $177,681. And those figures are not only another record gross for the city, but even more mind-boggling when you consider that Taker, Austin, Michaels were not on the show, and at no point ever advertised. From the very start, the advertised main event was Shamrock versus Maivia. And then we also had British Columbia, Vancouver. Set records for both attendance with 15,458 and a gate of 304,608. Although most of the tickets for the show were told a Shawn Michaels versus Owen Hart main event. Obviously, we talked about that last week. False advertising. Shawn Michaels gets hurt. But man, we're seeing huge. Winnipeg as well, 228, 8,157 fans for a gate of 149,468. St. Paul, 972. All these house shows are just drawing huge amounts of money, and they're cleaning up. And we're seeing, I think house shows are forecasting what the future will look like for professional wrestling. And before it reaches your TV screens, you're seeing a groundswell of all these people clamoring for the product in their markets. And no matter what card it is, people are just going to see WWF. And I think Vince is starting to realize that they're onto something here. We also have Reckless Youth, contrary to reports here and elsewhere, have yet to be contracted by WWF regarding a tryout. He's out of action due to a sprained hand. And then we finally, the last thing in the newsletter here, Vince McMahon ripped on Ahmed Johnson, both on the TSN TV show and also an Ottawa Sun interview, basically saying he didn't know the difference between Ahmed Johnson and Tony Norris, and that he was often injured, and he also injured others. And he said, the truth is that both sides were unhappy for a long time with their relationship. Ahmed was put over so strong that he thought he was a bigger star than he really was. Most of his team was killed by bad booking and more by the fact that he was always getting hurt. The more he was exposed, the more people realized he was what he wasn't. And Meltzer continues, it's one thing to have a guy who can't work a lick, but who can't draw money. It's another to have a guy on the undercard with a long-term contract. This was an issue throughout Mark Henry's early career. We talked about that. They signed that huge deal, post being, the record-setting weightlifter, the world's strongest man, signed that huge deal as a young man. And it took him a very long time and a lot of patience, a lot of undercard booking to eventually be worth that money. And now he's, a Hall of Famer, a guy that people look on very fondly. But you gotta remember, when 2002 happened, 2003, Mark Henry was yet to do the Hall of Fame stuff. He's yet to be the main eventer. He's just the guy who was a missed opportunity. He was sexual chocolate. He was the nation guy, but no one really knew what to do with him. And when they pushed him in the main event, I think his first real big thing was when they brought him back as the silverback against Taker in that casket match. And then he went on to do great things. I mean, most of his memorable stuff happened after, mid 2000s. And if you go, most memorable, the salmon jacket promo with John Cena, that's probably the biggest thing.
I broke my back.
Thank you, Mike Tyson. Yes, he did break his back. Let's get our fix. We're going to go into Raw, talk all about it. Man, I can't believe we spent 45 minutes on a newsletter, but a lot of good stuff in there. A lot of dirt. Vic Venom gave all of it. But let's get into Get Your Fix and talk about the Raw from February 23rd, 1998 in the heart of Texas.
Get your fix.
WWF Monday Night Raw, February 23rd, 1998, in the heart of Texas Coliseum, Waco, Texas. Man, we got some good Raw for you, and this is a Saturday show, so don't forget that. Wrestling is not the priority on these networks, especially on USA. If they have something else going on, if it's a sporting event, if it's the Westminster Dog Show, guess who's taking a back seat? It's pro wrestling. That was the same case here, but they're starting to really earn their keep on the networks where people are looking at them as the priority. They're the drawing card, and they're bucking what was the preconceived notion of the past of what pro wrestling was and what it could do for TV ratings. And this Saturday show did a solid 3.0. The return of Monday saw a slight increase of 3.2. Meanwhile, the night after Super Bowl Nitro received a 4.6 off the hours, 4.9, 4.3, and 4.6. There's a lot of people watching wrestling. And we open the show. New Age Outlaws coming out. Road Dogg's on the mic, and he's just talking about taking out Legion of Doom. And they may or may not have the dumpsters. They took out the two old fossils, and now it's time for the LOD to bring out their old walkers and come to the ring. So we get a match for the tag team championship, and it's not a long one, as we continue to talk about throughout 1998. Not a long match, but this match starts with LOD charging down, and the brawl is on. Outlaws getting absolutely worked here, and Billy Gunn's thrown down to the floor, and Dog is thrown into the ropes. Animal runs him over, and then power bombs him. Gunn runs and makes the save, and then obviously we get the back and forth. We get a hot tag situation. Animal getting the hot tag destroys the Outlaws, and Gunn is sent to the floor. Road Dogg's hammered by both, and they hit their finisher. And some reason the ref turns and tells Hawk to leave. And Gunn runs in, hits Hawk, knocks him to the floor, and they use a title belt to hit Animal. And that's it. That's 3. 6 minutes and 14 seconds. The ref pretty much forces Hawk out of the ring instead of making the cover when they have used that move 100 times. Clearly a warped finish. The ref probably was a little bit confused. How to get to the finish, how to have his back turned some way. It looked awkward. Pretty much LOD's had enough at this point. They start beating on each other. So Hawk and Animal feuding, the thing that you don't want to see. I mean, these guys are legendary tag teams, but they had a bright idea to feud them up. Not sure exactly why they did that. Animal leaves and runs back to the ring, and they continue to brawl. I don't see the decision why it would be beneficial to break either one of these guys up. If you want to have them have their own singles run, I get it, but that's not what was ever going to happen with the LOD. Their identity was in their tag team, and you split them up. Or it could just be a tease, and we'll continue down the line. But we see some dark days for Legion of Doom, paired by Hawk being used with a lot of his personal demons. But that, to me, it's haunting because of how they treated that situation. But of course, we'll talk about that. But yeah, this was shitty. I didn't like that they split LOD up. But that leads us into our next match, which is short, but again, two very talented guys. Ken Shamrock taking on Jeff Jarrett. Of course, Jim Cornette's in Jeff Jarrett's corner. Double J's wary, man. He doesn't want to get in Shamrock's face, and there's not a lot of guys throughout 1998 that are booked stronger than the world's most dangerous men. There's really not. Ken Shamrock is ticketed for the main event, and things change from now until 99. But at this point, it seems like Ken Shamrock is going to be a huge star. And yes, he reaches certain heights, and there's a point. But I want to know, and this is one of the reasons we're doing Shot Nostalgia, what happens from this point during this feud with Rocky Maivia for the IC title, where he's literally getting the upper hand on everybody he's touching with. So when he becomes a lackey in the corporation, what happens in between? So we're going to be doing that. And it's hard to know that when you're watching live as a kid. But I remember at one point, this is the time Ken Shamrock felt like a really big deal. And there was a time he woke up and he just didn't. So I'm curious if it was an injury. I'm curious if it was just bad booking, or he lost the shine on their end. Who knows, but we're going to get into it. But this match is 4 minutes and 22 seconds. They should have given more time. This is one of those matches you look at in the card, especially even the first match, probably should have got a little more time, but this is just Attitude Era style booking, just chaos. Get your stuff in and get out of there. And the fans are chanting that Jarrett sucks, and he's climbing to his feet after being beaten down by Ken Shamrock. Shamrock gets up first. He blocks some blows, but giving some back, drop kicks him, and then he hits the Hurricane Rana, which I love. Shamrock's Hurricane Rana, one of the better Hurricane Ranas, underrated from a guy you don't expect it from. Sometimes that's the best Hurricane Rana, right? They go back and forth, and Ken Shamrock accidentally hits the ref, of course, because it's the Attitude Era. It's Vince Russo booking, and Double J uses this time to hit Shamrock. Jim Cornette runs in with the racket, and then he hits Double J instead. Ken applies the ankle lock, and man, no one's getting out of the ankle lock. Double J's out cold. Shamrock refuses to release it and shoves the ref off afterwards, and then relents and leaves. This is similar to the finish we're going to see at WrestleMania 14, with Shamrock eventually gets the decision reversed. But this is a thing where he's not able to control himself, and it costs him matches. So, but this is classic Vince Russo, overbook stuff, and this is more brawls and more ref bumps and things like that.
You want the dirt? Guess who's got the shovel?
So yeah, we get some, Shamrock gets another win heading into WrestleMania, being booked very, very strong. So of course, I'm a huge fan of this, big fan of Ken Shamrock, but I'm again very curious what happens from now until probably this time in 1999 to see exactly what happens. And maybe it's the summer, maybe it's at SummerSlam where he's feuding with Owen Hart. Where does it exactly go wrong as far as his trajectory has been skyrocketed, but where does it pivot out? We'll see. Next match here, we have the Disciples of Apocalypse, which is the team of 8-Ball, Chains, and Skull taking on the Truth Commission, which is Kurgan, Recon, and Sniper in a 6-man tag team match. Winner faces the Elite at Revolution. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a 6-man match here. And 6-man matches, we saw an 8-man tag in No Way Out. We saw a few 6-man matches happen on these Raws. There's no division for it. It's just advancing storytelling, whatever story they're trying to tell here. Obviously, the Jackal's in the corner of the Truth Commission. And we get some stuff going on. Again, it's not a long match, 4 minutes and 13 seconds. I guess I should just tell you when they're long matches because you can assume they're all under 8 minutes. And we get Chains hitting Sniper with the big boot. He hits him some more, and now Ball's back in, and they elbow poor Recon, who's just absolutely getting smashed up by the team. He's sandwiched in the corner, and then get him in a rear chin lock. Skull's tagged in, and then Kurgan gets a tag, and he's double slammed, but he pops right back up in the brawl on the floor. 8-Ball's hit in the face, and the paralyzer is applied, and the Chains hits him from behind, and the bell has rung. Weird ending. Clearly, it's one of those situations where you're like, why would they even do it this way? And then the commission's arguing after. Sniper is slapped by Jackal. Kurgan puts him in the paralyzer. Now Recon gets slapped by Jackal. We have LOD breaking up. Now we got Truth Commission breaking up. A lot of chaos going on. Soap opera style of storytelling. And it's not long until Kurgan's in the Oddities, one of the more over jobber groups. And I'm very excited to see it. So we continue. DX in the back. On the screen, I should say. They're in San Antonio, and they're at Shawn Michaels' house. Shawn is at his home bar, turns around and walks through the bar door, and Chyna's there talking to a fan and taking Steve's best shot, and he kisses his wife. Triple H declares that he's looking for ratings, and they are there at Shawn's house. In the next 4 weeks, they will set the Nielsen's on fire, and they will discuss next week on Raw, and we'll start there, as Steve, Tyson, and Owen will be there, and it will end at WrestleMania. Triple H claims that WrestleMania is stamped X-rated. And for the next match here, Sonny is our guest announcer for the match between Taka Michinoku and Barry Windham with his whole crew behind him. Jim Cornette, Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson. And this match, as you can expect, is less than 5 minutes. In fact, it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and it is a no contest. So we get a lot of stuff going on and a lot of meaningless stuff. But the ending was pretty interesting because of what happened. So let's go right to the middle where Taka's placed up top. Barry superplexes him, followed up with a running lariat. He goes for the pin, and here comes the guy that's in my corner. To my left, it's Kane. And we get Kane coming out, and Barry has run. Taka's motionless in the middle of the ring. Kane picks him up, chokeslams him, then finishes him off for the team's tombstone. Paul Bearer grabs the mic, and he says there is only one WWF superstar Kane wants, and that, of course, is the Rattlesnake Steve Austin. And he said he wants him to listen very closely. If you have the guts next week on Raw, step in the ring and look Kane right in his good eye, which is funny. He said, look him square in the eye. So Kane, the dude is unstoppable at this point. So this is another chance for them to do battle with Nitro and putting their red hot baby face Steve Austin versus their monster that has been unbeatable to this point, Kane. People are going to want to tune in to see it. And of course, they figure out a way to not do it. But this is sort of the beginning of just let's give our best shot for these TV shows and let's get a good rating. All right. So, I'm not a huge fan of Taka Again Destroy here, and because I need my Taka fix, but we'll get more Taka next week. And we also continue to have more things here. Dusty Rhodes, and I quote here, is behind an opaque curtain talking about his career. They show him fighting Flair in the WWF. He's talking about his legend and how Funk kicked his ass. And now they show him elbowing Rude and dropping the elbow on people. And he says, I'm really proud of my son, how he touched the gold. and his son came from his loins, and his proudest moment was making it to WrestleMania and Dancing with Sapphire. This is just making fun of Dusty, and this is some bad taste shit here. Not great. Dustin does come out, though, to Dusty's theme, wearing polka dots, and JR informs us that Dusty does not mind this and thinks it's funny. This is in bad taste, man, especially with all the legacy of Dusty Rhodes and how they want to go back and honor it. And, of course, you could go back in history and say you're just, people that were at the top were making bad decisions, but it's amazing to me that eventually you come back and mend fences. And this ties with a lot of the Cody Rhodes story to WrestleMania. And this shows how disrespected the Rhodes family really was going for the longest time. I mean, go from Dusty Rhodes to Goldust, and each guy made the best of what they were given, but they were never taken seriously. So it's funny because this really resonated with me as I'm watching this, because of just how it was bad. Like, just to disrespect the history and the legacy of Dusty Rhodes, especially with how honored it is now. And I understand it's a war and it's one of those things where you want to make the other guy look bad, but not the expense of a guy like Dusty. And his contributions to wrestling go well beyond just, I don't know. It wasn't good, but they were, at the end of the day, they were bringing light to WCW, which I still don't understand that approach. When you do these types of people remember they exist. Like, oh yeah, Dusty does exist. Oh, he might be on WCW. He might have someone tune over. So I don't know. It's a bygone era of wrestling that you're never going to see. I don't think people are ever going to have this level of pettiness. And that's really what the Monday Night War was. Maybe we'll see some of it from Tony, and we see some shots taken in a veiled way, but this is so out on Front Street that it's crazy how disrespectful they are openly being. And of course we get the artist formerly known as Goldust. As I said, he came out to Dusty's old theme, and he gets defeated by Bradshaw pretty quickly, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Goldust is dancing. Goldust is a lost soul here. I mean, he's a lost character, and I'm sure, I remember fondly the Goldust character throughout, the beginning, the iterations, the feud with Razor Ramon, the feud with Roddy Piper. That was Goldust to me. But this Goldust, he's trying to find some identity right now. He's doing like imitation things from week to week, whether it be Marilyn Manson. Here we have obviously cosplaying his dad. But Goldust does the patented Dusty shots and his clothesline and finished off. It's just comic relief on their end, but it's not funny. That's the other part. But I digress. We continue, and we got Kevin Kelly is with Hawk, and he wants to know what's going through his mind, and Hawk keeps walking. And then we get The Rock taking on Steve Blackman, but of course The Rock has the whole nation with him. D'Lo Brown, Farouk, Kama Mustafa, Mark Henry. And this match, again, it's angle advancement. D'Lo winds up costing the match to The Rock, and you wonder how they're going to keep Steve Blackman undefeated. Well, this is how they do this. D'Lo Brown grabs the nunchucks, tosses them over The Rock's head, and Blackman grabs them, uses them on The Rock, getting the win. So The Rock gets pinned. It's not in a clean way, but you keep Steve Blackman undefeated, which was important at the time. People, you can't forget Steve Blackman was being booked very strongly, and you're building dissension in the nation, which short match, but it got its job done. And we got all these different personalities at ringside, and I'm curious to see where the nation stuff continues. Steve Blackman throughout 1998, they give up on him later on, but this was nice to see him getting a little bit of shine here. Mike Belcaster likes Steve Blackman, so he's okay in my book. After the match, D'Lo's yelling at Farouk, to The Rock, I should say, saying that Farouk made him do it, and The Rock demands for D'Lo to get back in the ring, and an argument absolutely ensues. Farouk's in there. Farouk then leaves the ring, signals for the troops to depart with him. There's a little hesitancy, but you can definitely see there's a clear defining line of whose nation do you want to be part of, and that's an interesting story that they're really starting to weave week to week. We get Luna with Kevin Kelly in the back. So Luna just building up more Sable stuff. And then Slaughter comes in after the next segment, has words for the NWA referee. And he said Cornette has some words for Slaughter about being an NWA match and is ignored by Earl Hebner. And there's an NWA ref sent to the back, which means we have our tag team championship for the NWA. So 2 tag titles on the line in this match. In this show. So the NWA World Tag Team Championships on the line. The Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, with Jim Cornette in their corner, the defending champions, defending, of course, against the Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher. This match goes one of the longer matches, 7 minutes and 39 seconds. Really, really bad match. I can't emphasize enough how bad this match was. And it's not because of Rock and Roll. I don't know what it was. It just had a really hard time linking up. And I think it's Rock and Roll is not used to working that WWF style. They're trying to fill these gaps in logic and trying to get to the end before the end's even close to being there. With the Rock and Roll Express missing a double drop kick, Thrasher gets the hot tag and takes it to both of them. Morton gets side slammed by Thrasher, and then Ricky Morton makes the save, and now all four are going at it. Cornette hits Thrasher with the racket, and he falls on top of Morton for the win. So clearly the Rock and Roll Express are not happy. Cornette is pretty much crying, so not great. Headbangers become the new NWA World Tag Team Champions, whatever that means to you. There you go. Pete Rose is announced to be at WrestleMania, and then Austin video package leading on his road to WrestleMania, which leads us to our main event here for the European Championship. Mark Merrow getting a shot at the European Championship with Sable in his corner. Owen Hart defending, of course. Owen Hart gets the win here by DQ. Of course, the fans from the jump are chanting for Sable, and he drops down for a monkey flip, but gets a knee to the head. Owen then drop kicks him. Merrow whips Owen into the corner and then hits him with a really strong clothesline. Going to the ending, we get Merrow pummeling him, shoves the ref off. Merrow works over the back and then hits him in the crotch. Owen then counters the TKO and DDTs him, puts him in the sharpshooter, and the ref calls for the bell while he's in the sharpshooter, thinking he tapped out, but it was because he already pushed the ref. So it's a DQ win for Owen Hart. Still a win in his book. Either way, he was keeping the European Championship, whether he tapped him out or he won by DQ. And yeah, so Luna comes down. She's held back. Sable's being held back too. Mark Merrow screaming at her, and he pushes him down. And now Merrow goes after Goldust, who's continuing to run his mouth at Sable. And they're still trying to get at each other as now Goldust and Luna are led to the back. Sable tells Luna to get her ass back there, calling her all sorts of names. And Luna's frothing and shoves Goldust down. Sable's heading after her too. So interesting to end the show. Felt like you're not really advancing any main storylines, like Stone Cold stuff, like Mike Tyson stuff. What are we doing here? Focusing on the mid-card was interesting because the mid-card gets a lot of heat, and I guess the only way to build any momentum is to focus on it. And there was more wrestling on the card, but it was one of those things not in a good way. So not a really bad show at all. It was an enjoyable watch. A lot of good characters here, but there's stuff that could have been just thrown away. And if I'm being honest with you, you probably didn't even have to watch it as far as advancing the story to WrestleMania 14. Nothing happened that you would have missed. I mean, of course, we had a title change, but who cares about the NWA titles? So,
You want fluff? Go eat a marshmallow.
Vic Venom said it best. That's some fluff for you. And we lead ourselves into the next week of Monday Night Raw from the Gund Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. A lot of memorable moments there where the Cleveland Cavaliers call home. March 2nd, 1998. This is the first Raw right now that we're going to see in a while that they're pulling out all the stops. This has been the Raw. We read about this in the newsletter that heavily hyped with Tyson there. DX is going to be there. Austin's there. And this is a very, very important thing for the build to WrestleMania 14. And we get off hot. So they come out, DX being them. Triple H states that something tonight officially begins and WrestleMania is now X-rated. Kids should get their parents' permission to watch as discretion is advised, but will be ignored. Triple H then focuses attention on Owen Hart, saying that his run as European champ is now over. And Shawn is laughing at this, and they focus on from Owen to Iron Mike, and Mike Tyson gets the focus of them, and he's going to make him an offer he cannot refuse. And he continues about his WrestleMania match with Austin, and he gets the crowd riled up. No one really gets the crowd riled up like a Shawn Michaels promo. He does a great job, especially in this era. He knows exactly what to say. And he says Austin's not tough enough to take on Shawn Michaels, and he showed him once how close he could get to the championship, and now he wants Austin to lace up his boots because tonight he's going to hit him with the sweet chin, courtesy of HBK, and he needs to shine his chrome dome. And man, we get the glass break, and what a pop. Austin gets in the ring, right in his face, jawing at him, and the lights go out, and bam, here comes Kane. And Paul Bearer basically states that it's all over for Austin. The lights come back on. It's just Austin in the ring, and he gets out and shoves Cole off his chair, takes the headset, and he said this is a bunch of bullshit as Shawn Michaels runs off when the lights go out. And he's going to kick Kane's ass tonight. He's going to take it to Tyson too. He thinks this is a bunch of bullshit. And here we go. So nice opening segment, a lot of different personalities. I mean, go through the list of guys that are important in the Attitude Era. This was a lot of those personalities and sets the stage for the main event. They did this really well throughout the Attitude Era, and they did this really well throughout moving all the way through the ruthless aggression, setting the stage for later in the night, setting that main event. And that was a good storytelling mechanism that they were able to do to build some hype and get people to tune in and continue to tune in, especially when there was an option on the other side. So this was a really good job by WWF. And we got a limo pulling up with Shane McMahon, with Mike Tyson following him. So already we get more stars on this show in the first 25 minutes than we got in the last 2 weeks of Raw. And they were recapping what Cactus Jack and Charlie did to the Outlaws. And here come the Outlaws with their tag team titles and neck braces on. Road Dogg gets on the mic and says that they were brutally attacked, and now they're pressing charges for murder. And he claims they have a case. And now they show handheld footage that Road Dogg had last week, and they were cursing as Cactus and Chainsaw Charlie are annihilating the car. And then Gunn is giving him now a back rub, and nothing is wrong with that. Road Dogg acts distressed. Road Dogg now has a doctor's note saying that they do not have to wrestle tonight. And then Sergeant Slaughter gets on the screen and says that they were fine and you will defend your championships again. And we get the title defense right after this. And it's the Disciples of Apocalypse. If in case you are thinking the Disciples of Apocalypse are ever going to win the tag titles, you're wrong. 8-Ball and Skull were never going to win on this night. But they did get the win here. And only because the Outlaws were being really, really cowardly heels. The Disciples of Apocalypse, 8-Ball and Skull, won by countout. So the Outlaws attack them right away. This is how it goes down. DOA turn around and rip them apart. Gunn is then nailed with a spine buster, and they come right back, use the tag titles as weapons, and now they're on the floor. And Outlaws run for their lives, and the DOA get a win. More angle advancement, building up that match at WrestleMania 14, getting people very, very excited to see the Outlaws lose. I don't think anybody wanted DOA to win the tag titles, but they want to see the Outlaws get their comeuppance, and we're going to get that hopefully from Terry Funk and Mick Foley. And we get Mark Merrow coming out, and he sends Sable to the back. We get a quick match. Mark Merrow defeated Tom Brandi in a really quick match. This is more of the same thing every week. It's Sable being sent to the back. Sable and Luna are building their own feud in here as well. And this is also right after that real life fight between Sable and Luna in the back and Sonny trying to break it up and gets decked. That's the story that's being told. Meltzer tells a different story about how it was directly with Sonny and Luna, and then Sable was the one breaking it up. Nevertheless, they were able to put their difference aside and put it on the screen, which was inspiring to watch because we can't see that sometimes with the talent today. And they show Pete Rose will be at WrestleMania, and we get the next match here. Another title match is for the WWF European Championship. Owen Hart defending against Mark Henry. And it's another DQ finish, 5 minutes and 37 seconds. Mark Henry winds up getting the win via DQ. The ending saw Chyna getting up on the apron, Owen walking up to her, and then goes up top right beside her. He watched her briefly, but then goes up anyway. She pushes him off in the waiting arms of Henry, who squeezes the life out of him with a bear hug. Chyna then comes down, hits Mark Henry right in the crotch. Disqualification, clearly right in front of the ref. And Michael Cole is asking why she did that. And, well, I guess the real answer would be that she wants Triple H to win the title. And I don't know. Why do a DQ? Why not just have Owen win the match? Don't do the match if you don't have a finish. But all these like DQ finishes become way too common. And I understand it has to be used sometimes to advance story. But for example, AEW uses it. I think they had their DQ with Swerve Strickland and Dustin on Rampage. It was like the third DQ in their history. I think we've had 3 DQs in just this Raw alone. So to each their own. I mean, there's got to be more creative finishes that you can go with. And I'm blaming you, Vic. I really am. I mean, Vic Venom. Come on.
You want fluff? Go eat a marshmallow.
All right, so we move to the next match here. It's another 6-man tag match, and it's so goddamn short. 1 minute and 48 seconds. But Barry Windham and the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson with Jim Cornette taking on Taka Michinoku and the Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher. The Headbangers are mocking Rock and Roll from the beginning, losing their titles, and remind them it's not the 80s. And they ask Taka what he thinks of Cornette, and he calls him a jackass, which is a huge pop from the crowd. Robert Gibson and Mosh start off. They go back and forth. Mosh nails him with a monkey flip, and Taka gets the tag, which gets a decent pop. Him coming in the ring. I just wanted you guys to recognize this. Taka gets a decent reaction. He's carried to the corner, and the Rock and Roll hammer him, but escapes and tags in Thrasher. He runs in power slams Robert Gibson. The match is breaking down with everyone going at it, and then Taka flies right into Barry with a plancha, and they do not show the ending, but Thrasher's finished off Gibson and gets the pin. Cornette grabs the mic and something was wrong with the mic, so it's hard to hear him. Thrasher that used the tennis racket on Gibson as Cornette came into the ring. I would have liked this to have more time, 1 minute and 48 seconds, but we get Vince in the ring following this, and he wants the fans to give a warm welcome, and he is continually booed out of the building. And then he asks Cleveland fans to welcome, but he's booed louder. Vince acts baffled and then introduces the baddest man on the planet, Mike Tyson, who gets a mixed response. Tyson comes out, shakes Vince's hand, and he wants to get right down to business. He then asks Tyson the question if he's going to be the enforcer or is Austin going to enforce his own rules. Vince then asks for some respect and gets booed even more. He's getting booed like Adam Silver or any Gary Bettman in different cities, Rob Manfred, different commissioners, Roger Goodell at the NFL draft. That's the level of booing he was getting here. And Vince was acting naive to it, which is funny because only a few months from now, he's going to be leaning heavily into it and saying, wanting those boos. But I think he knew what he was doing here. He knew the Vince McMahon character was created, or the Mr. McMahon character was created after 1997 Survivor Series. So Vince asks for some respect continually by them and gets none. Tyson's about to say something, and here comes DX coming down with the purpose. They got refs by their side. Shawn then tells Mike Tyson he is not Stone Cold, and they're not here to disrespect him like Stone Cold did. This is not how DX does business. And he's here to call out people, and he introduces himself and will treat him like a man and tells Tyson he's calling him a boy. And Tyson simply responds, let's do it. And Shawn wants everybody out of the ring, and they can go at it. Now it is just Tyson and HBK, and they jaw at each other, which was building some excitement up. Like, I do know that, as you can see in the picture over here, he's wearing the DX shirt. There's an excitement like, oh, I wonder what would happen if they actually went at it. Tyson shoves him and does it again and wants Shawn to hit him, and Shawn backs away, grabs his shirt for obvious purpose, rips it off, and there it is. You guys see it right there in the photo on the screen. If you listen to audio only, reveals a DX shirt, the classic DX shirt, the first ever one. The fans literally explode. Tyson does the crotch chops, saying suck it. For whatever reason, Tyson can't figure out how to do the suck it taunt, but everyone's so excited. Everyone's so pumped to see Mike Tyson joining DX. And DX is equally as excited. They all mock Vince, who's just beside himself, walking away. The fans are very much into this, and this probably is the biggest DX reaction so far. And Shawn Michaels says something, flexes, and Vince looks on, and he's very, very upset. Not only did Austin ruin his Tyson moment, but then DX get involved, and they ruined it as well. Interesting layer to the story leading up to WrestleMania, because now there's really a big reason for people to be stacking in Austin's corner. Like, it seemed obvious that Austin would win the title, but now there's a little bit of doubt. Wow, how is he going to get one up on not only Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Chyna, but also Mike Tyson? Very, very smart decision making. So we get DX and Tyson celebrating in the back. And then we lead into the next match. It is another DQ, unfortunately. Steve Blackman defeated Kama Mustafa by DQ. A decent match. The fans, continue to pop. And the only reason I'm going to tell you this stuff at the end is because Ken Shamrock getting involved. And obviously The Rock as well. So let's go to the end. Blackman was hitting thrust kicks in the throat. Goes for a submission finisher. And The Rock and Farouk run in to put an end to that. And they both use their finisher on him. Shamrock then comes in, and Kama unwisely stays and gets a belly-to-belly for his troubles. So advancing more storytelling. And then we get Austin prepping for his match later in the night. And we get, and I wish Belcaster was here to see this, but it's goddamn Colonel Parker. And this is a familiar face for those that were in season 1 of Shot Nostalgia for WCW. He wants everyone to get on their feet and show some respect to the greatest singer of all time. And then he calls out Jeff Jarrett. And it seems like we're done with this NWA gimmick, because now it's time for the country singer to be back. He's wearing a cowboy hat with lights on it. The Double J thing is back. And he spells his name for everyone and calls himself the world's greatest singer, entertainer, and wrestler. He wishes Cornette and the NWA good luck, as they were not prepared for someone as multidimensional as Double J. And only one man can shine, and he hypes up Tennessee Lee and spells that too. He calls himself great. And then we get him defeating Flash Funk in a short match here, just to reestablish Jeff Jarrett as the entity that is Jeff Jarrett, trying to get him over one more time. They really believed in this gimmick here. Flash Funk, shout out to Flash Funk, Too Cold Scorpio. He'll be wrestling Desmond Cole in a month or so. So pumped for that. I think that's in Rhode Island. I think that's coming up soon. So check out Desmond Cole's Instagram. But anyway, Flash Funk's match. Jarrett gets the win here. It's just an enhancement thing. Uh, yeah, not a great match, but some good spots, I guess. Double J being backdropped and then pokes the eye, punches Funk, sends him the ropes, and gets nailed with a rolling kick. Flash Funk it wasn't a squash match. He got some offense in, and we get obviously the figure 4 to end the match. JR calls it Shades of the Nature Boy, but clarifies that it's not shades of Nature Boy Ric Flair, shades of Buddy Rogers. And yeah, so now he's back to square one. Like, this is back to the same exact gimmick he broke in with, and they're going to see if they can get him over, and spoiler alert, they don't. So DX and Tyson head to the limo and all very pumped. Michael Cole tries to get a word and is told to beat it, and Tyson threatens to knock out Austin. And we get another recap of Hawk and Animal, and they're breaking the LOD up, which is the dumbest shit I think I've seen in a very long time.
You want the dirt? Guess who's got the shovel?
Michael Cole couldn't get the dirt, so we lead into Kane and Paul Bearer versus Steve Austin, which has been hyped up since last week. Paul Bearer comes out screaming about Mike Tyson joining DX, and it'll be all shock for Austin when he wakes up the next morning next to Taker in the pits of hell. Austin comes out, makes a hard right towards Triple H, grabs him, and then turns right to the Sweet Chin Music from Shawn Michaels. And Shawn was probably right about his prediction at the beginning of the show. Austin is absolutely out cold. He's slowly getting to his feet and is up and shoves the refs off as he heads to the back. JR then says DX has left the building, and Paul Bearer saws the mic and says, the mic is shitty again in the Gun Arena, by the way. It's still not great. He's told to grab something. He heads out of the ring, grabs a teen from the audience, some of the round, and beats him. The teen was wearing an Austin shirt, so obviously a plant to get some more heat. Paul Bearer grabs the bell and the timekeeper and brings him in the ring. And then Bearer believes we all should pay respect to Taker and wants the bell tolled 10 times and demands everybody stay silent. Paul Bearer wants him to ring it one more time for himself, and Kane choke slams him and then choke slams him again. So Paul then wants a tombstone, and Kane obliges. Paul then tells everyone that Kane has done everything he said he would do. His Kane has one more tombstone left in his giant body, and Kane is not quite finished yet. Vader's gone, and the list goes on and on. They have all gone down at the hands of Kane. It's one hand left, wonders what it will be, and he yells at Lawler and JR if they want one. He wants someone to step up, and then we finally get it. Undertaker's gong to a huge pop. He assures everyone that he's not the Undertaker as he is gone. Bearer is actually promising Kane that is not the Undertaker. The bell keeps tolling. Paul has had enough of the damn music and tells JR to stop, and he continues now. The music starts. The lightning hits a coffin at the top, and the Undertaker rises up, and JR is losing his absolute mind. Undertaker stands up and bellows to the top of his lungs, "Welcome to hell." And huge moment here. Kane is absolutely disappointed. Thought he killed his brother Taker. This would be the same disappointment he feels throughout his whole career. This happens multiple times. Kane at this point should probably know he cannot destroy him. He's like Michael Myers. And he goes to the darkness of his own accord at the time of peace. And man, we get a lot more storytelling for Taker and Kane building up this WrestleMania 14 match. We'll get another WrestleMania match, WrestleMania 20 when Taker comes back. But they're lifetime rivals. You can point to Taker's other opponents, but I don't think anyone had the same appeal as wrestling his own kayfabe brother, which was cool. So very, very awesome stuff here. I mean, it's goofy, but it's also good because he's talking about Taker's parents and, them being taken in by Paul Bearer's kids, calling Taker the Lord of Darkness. It fits the aesthetic here. Wasn't the best Raw, but it really advanced things towards WrestleMania, and that's all you can ask at this time. Every show should have a function. A lot of promos, some wrestling mixed in. I mean, not a lot of great wrestling. They teased the main event, and then obviously no Austin, so we always rip on WCW for that. It's not really a WWF thing, but this is the case here. They advertise the main event and it doesn't happen. Of course, we got Tyson stuff. It lived up, but when you advertise Kane versus Austin, I'm sure there were people that walked away a little bit disappointed. And Tyson joining DX was absolutely classic. And they had an article in one of the Seattle newspapers that they're trying to reform his image, but they had him join the heel team. But, obviously it's wrestling, so we all just need to take a chill pill for a sec and just look at wrestling from a storytelling. It shouldn't be taken so seriously. And some of the angles at this point are really, they need to be paid off. And we're almost at WrestleMania, but they've done a good job of building those main events, which is cool. And it took a turn with the Tyson stuff when Tyson joined DX. It's not something you saw coming, let's be honest. So we're going to get one more Raw here, and it is the March 9th Raw from the Wheeling Civic Center in Wheeling, West Virginia. I'm curious if any of the bad Chads were here.
You want Raw? I'll get downright nasty.
All right, so here we are, Monday Night Raw, like I mentioned, March 9th, 1998, the Wheeling Civic Center from Wheeling, West Virginia. A lot of angle advancement the week before, promo heavy, and obviously with Tyson joining DX, it shifts where we're going for WrestleMania. So we have a recap of last week before we get the first match here, which the Nation of Domination, the team of Farouk and The Rock, which was never going to do have any unison to it, taking on Ken Shamrock and Steve Blackman. And this, I want you guys to circle this moment when Ken Shamrock comes out, and I want you to listen to his reaction, isolate the audio, and listen to Ken Shamrock's reaction when he comes out. I understand it's the open of the show. Crowd is hot, ready for action, but Ken Shamrock is absolutely over, white hot, like not Austin level hot, and I understand everybody's over in this time. Ken Shamrock, though, gets a huge reaction to the point where it's like, damn, can't believe he's that over. And I still think he's a missed opportunity as far as WWF champion goes. And I know we were saying that before, and he becomes a focal point of conversation. I really believe he could have been a great WWF champion if they would have pulled the trigger.
You want fluff? Go eat a marshmallow.
So Farouk and Blackman start the match. They go back and forth, but Farouk gets a boot to the face and then is knocked around. Shamrock then gets the tag, gets a huge reaction here again, runs right into a spine buster, and The Rock gets the tag. So right now, Farouk and The Rock are working in unison. We get a Rocky Sucks chant in the middle of the match where the crowd is just absolutely foaming at the mouth. Farouk comes back in. Blackman's power slam, nearly pin. Blackman then drops him and Rock is tagged, but Shamrock gets the hot tag and goes absolutely off, hitting all his finishers, all the sequence moves. Rock's nailed with a jumping side kick, then power slam. He kicks out of 2 and then gets hit with the Hurricane Rana. Like I said, nothing like a Ken Shamrock Hurricane Rana. Let's go to the end here. We get Blackman tossed out and Henry beats on him. Ref calls for the bell. Rock pushes Farouk back and wants Shamrock for himself and then brags about it. Shamrock makes a comeback. Rock rolls to the floor after the belly to belly, and Farouk would not allow the Nation to come in as The Rock heads up to the ramp. Shamrock stalks him and then puts him in the ankle lock, and Farouk will not allow anybody to help, and a bunch of refs try to break it up. This is a pivotal moment in the Nation. Rock is stuck in, and this is great imagery. You have Farouk on the ramp watching with the Nation behind him, trying to help. They want to help Rocky. Rocky in this devastating finisher, building up that feud with Ken Shamrock even further, and then also emphasizing the divide with the Nation. Very, very good. It's a fun match. A lot of personalities. It's interesting to see how strong Ken Shamrock, Steve Blackman's booked. He's not main event level, but he is really unbeatable at this point. He has not been beaten. And we will see when they eventually lose the shine on Steve Blackman. But at this point, he's being booked like a serious contender to potentially the Intercontinental title, which seems laughable now. But we also get Triple H in the ring, reminding us that this is another night that is going to be X-rated. DX is really doing that parental advisory thing. Chyna then talks about Owen's small head last week and may take it to another level if she wants to. Then she introduces, or I should say Triple H introduces Shawn Michaels, and the ladies definitely let his presence be known in the crowd. You can hear them just have that audible pop, that Jeff Hardy pop when he takes off that the fishnet shirt when he's about to hit the swanton. That type of pop, you know what I'm talking about if you're a wrestling fan. But then again, before we can introduce him, Triple H shows us the super kick over and complete with sound effects. Shawn's at the bar and it is empty and he's chilling. He says hi to Hunter and Chyna and wants to review what happened last week. He's happy that Tyson is a part of D-Generation X, and he talks about what happened to Austin last week. And Stone Cold's just like everybody else when they come up against Shawn Michaels. Stone Cold can beat everybody up and they get all mad, and that's why Shawn is champ, because he has done that time and time again. Steve has shown nothing new. He does not lay down for anyone, and he will continue to take out Austin at WrestleMania. Triple H then tells the crowd to suck it, and for some reason they bleep out suck in the broadcast, and Triple H heads to the announce table, and Kevin Kelly is thrown out. That's New Japan Pro Wrestling Kevin Kelly, by the way. And Triple H does not think Austin will be showing his face anytime soon. But of course, that's a lie. And we get Barry Windham taking on Owen Hart for the European Championship. And unfortunately, again, another European Championship ends in a dusty finish where Barry Windham gets the win, but he doesn't become champion. So Barry Windham defeated Owen Hart 5 minutes and 15 seconds by countout. And we do know a title just cannot change hands with a countout. It seems like they just don't want to give Owen any wins. Then why is he even champion? And even how he won the title was shady as well. So, I mean, we all talk about how Owen would have been booked in a fantasy world in the future when you had, I mean, if he would have survived this era and he was involved in the ruthless aggression era, maybe he had a resurgence, but they showed no desire to push him in a way that was meaningful at all. So seeing him get counted out here is stupid. I mean, I know they're advancing the Triple H storyline, but he can't beat someone like Barry Windham, really, with his title on the line. Like, you couldn't have Triple H just attack him after the fact. So Cornette distracting the ref and China hits Owen right in the balls. And then Triple H is laughing as Owen's counted out. Bradshaw comes out and beats up Barry Windham. It's angle advancement, but again, why can't Owen just beat Barry Windham and do something else? So Owen did turn his ankle in this match, and it looked really bad. So he works the rest of these cards. Like, we're going to see him working WrestleMania and stuff, but there's a part in this match, and look out for it, that he turns his ankle and twisted pretty bad. Sable is going to be cuffed tonight, as is Luna later tonight. And then Austin will be here soon. They make sure to make that clear. And Lawler's in the back, nervously interviewing Paul Bearer and Kane. And Paul says, we will not beat you up. They mention Taker and Bearer do not want to talk to him, but rather talk about Vader. And they show his black eye and bandages around his head. He brings up Undertaker again. And then the benches start opening up and closing. Bearer's getting pissed, and it keeps happening. And Paul Bearer and Lawler flee with Kane left staring. Not a great backstage segment. And it's not technical difficulties. It's the Undertaker and his magic powers. So, yeah, we always see this with Taker, but it didn't come off as great here, especially with in the backstage area. It just comes off weird. But we have another match here. Jerry Lawler's involved in this one in the corner of his son, Brian Christopher, taking on Aguila with Taka Michinoku in his corner. And this is another DQ finish for no reason, but it's 4 minutes and 55 seconds. Jerry Lawler is still obviously shaken from what happened in the back with Undertaker and all the stuff with the magic. And Lawler gets on the apron, is pulled down. Taka gets destroyed by Lawler. Aguila goes to the top, and Lawler shoves him off, and the ref catches them. Match is tossed out. Decent action in between. Aguila, we talked about in the newsletter, he's one of those guys that Meltzer says needs to really work on scripting his matches because he's still very green. You could see some bright spots as like a lot of natural athleticism from him. Taka Michinoku clearly not wrestling, but he's, involved in the corner. We will see Aguila versus Taka for the light heavyweight championship at WrestleMania. So this relationship's either going to be mutual respect or going sideways. I forget exactly what happens, but Brian Christopher is a huge part of this division as well. So, more fodder for this division, but given no time, DQ finish, shitty ending. Match was really fast paced. There was some good stuff. Aguila's handspring elbow was good. So, definitely check this match out. Some of the best wrestling you'll see on the whole card. We get Austin coming out. He arrives at the arena, and he just heads right out to the ring. He has the mic in hand, and he has a little video, and then he's absolutely pissed off and angry. Vince comes out and claimed Vince came out and claimed that Tyson was the baddest man on the planet. And at this point, Austin believes that's old. Austin wants to see him say that, and then rewound and shown again. He sees it as an insult, and the fans absolutely agree. They're popping at everything Austin's saying. He's prepared to sit in the ring for 2 hours until Vince comes out and sets it straight. Austin would like a cold beer because he's going nowhere and calls Vince a yellow bastard. He tells JR to sit down before he stomps a mud hole in him, and he threatens to drag him in the ring. And here comes Briscoe, Lanza, and Austin threatens to beat them up too. He doesn't care. The fans start an Austin chant. Austin sits in a chair, and now Sergeant Slaughter comes out to a chorus of boos. Austin hopes, this got to be a joke, man. I want Vince McMahon. Austin orders that jackass to bring out Vince. They show Vince looking befuddled in the back, and Austin knows that he will not be suspended because WrestleMania is right around the corner. He's going to beat Slaughter's ass, and then Vince is shaking his head and is refusing to go to the ring. They go straight to commercial, and then we get more WWF employees at ringside are sent to the back with the threat of bodily harm from Stone Cold Steve Austin. Vince comes out. Austin's made and said, Vince comes out finally, and Austin is made sick because Vince is followed by Tyson around. like a puppy. And he said Vince has insulted him for the last time. He gets in Vince's face and wants Vince to say to his face that Tyson's the baddest man on the planet. Vince is now at a loss for words. And Austin calls his finger a figure of speech. And then he asks Vince if he wants him to become the champion. Vince will not answer. The fans answer for him and say, hell yeah. And he rips Vince's coat and he knows he will not be suspended. He continues to antagonize Vince. And he said, he better get out of the ring or get his ass kicked. And he counts down from 10. Vince leaves, calls him a son of a bitch, and he will pay for what he did. Austin calls him a coward again. And Austin goes on about kicking Sean's stringy-haired ass. And then, obviously, he's targeting the title. He's fired up. The fans are behind him. And we see the seeds of what's going to be a very important storytelling dynamic. It's Vince versus Austin. And this isn't the beginning of it. This is just layered story for it. But we are going to get this hotter than ever. This will be the hottest program throughout 1998 and 1999 as time goes on. It's the focal point of storytelling. Who would have thought Vince would be the hottest heel in wrestling? But he is. And he's not there yet, but he's close there. And you can see the fans are really reacting when he's in the ring with them. That leads us to our next match here. Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie defeating the Quebecers, 5 minutes and 26 seconds. There's a decent match. Again, this is just a tag match, and this is another tag team. The Quebecers are one of those teams that they feel lost in the shuffle in 1998. There's some good talent there. Obviously, PCO is a great, talented wrestler, still wrestling to this day. But that gimmick, the Quebecer gimmick, does not fit what's going on in 1998. This is one of those matches that's just to get Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie ready. One of those tune-up matches and to build up their momentum going against the Outlaws. But it was a fun match, great personalities. I love Cactus and Chainsaw together. And, we get Road Dogg coming out after and calls them old and hobbled and tells them to, we're ready for your WrestleMania. Cactus runs after them and Gunn blindsides Charlie with a chair, and then they run off. So really fun match, like I said, but short and served its purpose. We get Kane coming out. Paul Bearer has the microphone, talk about how Undertaker should have not come back, and Kane will make sure that he's taken care of. The lights go out, and then Taker is in the ring. They go out again, and Paul keeps screaming no. And when they come back, he is gone. Paul Bearer then talks about WrestleMania. Undertaker will be sent back to the dark side. So building up more of that spooky side of the storytelling, continuing it that way. We have the next match here. Mark Merrow with Sable in his corner, taking on the artist formerly known as Goldust, but Luna. Both women, as I mentioned before, will be handcuffed to the post, which they reluctantly agree to. And this match goes 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and we get a DQ finish. So Goldust hits his finisher and then decides to leg drop the back of the ref's head. He takes the handcuff key. Sable grins at him in the hopes of being unlocked, but he makes a U-turn and unlocks Luna. Luna then grabs Sable, who's, she's stuck still, rubbing makeup all over her face and now choking her out. Sable's finally unlocked and then chases him to the back. Luna and Goldust are in the back for a minute later, and they make a WrestleMania challenge, and Luna screeches towards Sable. So we're going to get this WrestleMania match. It's a program, I guess, right? Which leads us to the final segment of the show. And it's JR with Tyson. And Jim Ross wants to know what Tyson's impression of coming to a WWF show. And he's leaning into JR. And seriously, it's one of those things like he's unpredictable. Like, especially in 1998, Mike Tyson is one of those guys that you don't know what he's going to do. You probably can expect, you can tell him what you want to happen, but it's a very testy situation where who knows? So give JR a lot of credit for keeping his cool here. And JR wants to know about the next night on Raw and how he was disrespected by Austin and if he's a fan of Stone Cold. So then Tyson said, I will not be taking disrespected from anybody. And JR wants to know how Tyson can be fair due to his association with DX. Tyson then says, everybody uses people and he does not like being questioned about being fair. And he stormed off. So JR kept his cool. And there are a lot of officials in the ring. And here comes Triple H. And it's a match against Savio, Vega, and Austin comes down, stuns an official, and then Vega gets one. And then once Austin turns into some sweet chin music, and they have a chair ready, and we fade to black. So kind of a chaotic ending to Raw based on that JR and Tyson stuff. And then they were supposed to be having this Triple H and Savio Vega match. It doesn't happen. Austin comes in and upsets him. Then Shawn Michaels catches him in a trap. Seeing Austin not get the one-uppings on people, it's very interesting because you think back to this era, it feels like Austin's always on top. go back to that Rumble, he was one of those guys that felt like he was always getting the upper hand on every single person he interacted with. My biggest issue with a lot of the show is the interference in the matches, but it did build towards WrestleMania. The DQ finishes have to stop. I mean, I understand it's not about work rate, but there's got to be more creative ways to book finishes. Like there's got to be a ways to advance storytelling where you just throw matches out. So interesting dynamic of things going on both sides of the aisle as far as mid-card and main event goes. Everything feels very well built out. It feels like you're excited for WrestleMania. I'm excited for Austin and Michaels, and some of the stuff going on behind the scenes is exciting what's going on screen. And I think that can be said about any era of wrestling as well. I mean, specifically today, we could sit here and talk about that all day, about some of the stuff happening in the back. It's more interesting, but I don't know how many people actually knew what was going on with Shawn Michaels. I certainly didn't. As a kid, I didn't know Shawn Michaels was someone who didn't want to do business. I certainly didn't know how badly he actually was hurt. When you see him moving around doing the sweet chin music, it seems like he's absolutely fine, but obviously very, very seriously injured. And he goes out there and crushes it with Stone Cold and has a very memorable match. In my opinion, I'm very excited to go back and watch it again through fresh eyes, but this was a really good example of building up a main event throughout every show. And Mike Tyson's been a very essential part to all this. And I think continuing to have him throughout WrestleMania and weaved in to help emphasize Austin being just as a badass, if not more of a badass than Tyson, beautifully done. So let's get into the chaser. I'll tell you my favorite part of these three Raws, and we're going to get, into that a little bit.
The chaser.
All right, so every week we will pick our favorite part of these three events, whether it be two pay-per-views and a Raw. And I got to say, man, I am a huge, huge fan of everything they did with Tyson in that segment. I love the Tyson joining DX segment. It was one of those, you remember it happening. Of course, he's in Shawn Michaels' corner and he's in the ring and you remember the crotch chops. He can't do suck it. He's somehow doing it over his chest. He's, doing everything but the right thing. But seeing it happen again, it was a good way of having Tyson involved, because there was a time when this match was being built where it felt like he was just going to be a neutral party, and that you have to have lean into him being a bad guy. That was the beautiful part about it, that instead of trying to use WWF to rehabilitate his image, they leaned into the bad boy image and emphasized it turned up to 11. They really used what was happening behind the scenes and in real life and turned it up. And really, the best thing about it is that they utilized it the whole time to the build. And then he has his moment in the sun where that picture lives forever, where he's holding Austin's hand up with, the Austin 316 shirt in his hand. And that moment, Tyson, that's one of those things that's going to live forever. And Tyson was a part of it. And not that it helped repair his image, but in a good way, that's what people remember from WrestleMania. They remember him knocking out Shawn Michaels with the 1-2 punch and holding up Austin's hand. I mean, the three count, I'll still say to this day, left a lot to be desired. But at the end of the day, Mike Tyson was an essential part of this main event, and they did a really good job of using it.
Spinal.
So let's get into, because the bar lights are coming on. Like I said, I appreciate you guys hanging out here on a Friday night. We miss Mike Belcaster. He will be back next week, of course, when we're talking about WrestleMania 14. It's going to be here before you know it, and we're going to be talking about it next week. But let's get into closing the tab and prepare everybody for what's happening throughout the tavern.
Closing the tab.
All right, here we are closing the tab as the bar lights are coming on. We're saying goodbye to you guys, saying goodbye to Vic Venom. We're saying goodbye to Mike Tyson, Triple H, Glenn Jacobs, Paul Bearer. We're saying goodnight. Not goodbye. It's see you later.
You want fluff? Go eat a marshmallow.
So next week's show is going to be episode 5, believe it or not, of season 3. And believe it or not, it's March, man. We're right in the WrestleMania swing. We're about a month away from WrestleMania 39. And, what's more appropriate than the road to WrestleMania 39 as we get ready for our WrestleMania in the year 2023. Then rewatching WrestleMania 14 and going through the dirt sheets and talking about all the background knowledge we have about it now. So I really do appreciate you guys checking this out. Also, again, you guys probably, I'm at Remarkable Wrestling right now doing the Steel Cage Warzone, so no need for me to hype it up. You're either going to be there or you're not. But if you guys do want to catch the replay, it's on IWTV. Search Remarkable Wrestling. Use code Remarkable signing up if you're going to subscribe, because it does go a long way. We'll have more details for the upcoming potentially April event for Remarkable Wrestling, where I will be participating as well. We'll be sharing some posters and some art. And check out, I know that it aired the night before this, Remarkable Wrestling, my sit down with Gabriel Sky and Kono Kabucha, building up Better Than the Best 2. And of course, it's hyping up Steel Cage Warzone. It's talking about all the things building up for that night. But there's a lot of nuggets of information from both guys. It's my first time sitting down with Gabe Sky and with Kono Kabucha. I do plan on having them on a Visit to Tavern in a traditional sense, where we can talk about their career, talk about their interests, talk about all their favorite things about wrestling, their fandom, all that stuff. But this was more of a sit down, similar to JR sitting down with Tyson here on Raw, and just talking a little bit about the match. And a lot of it was building up the storylines and all that, but there is a lot of nuggets where they talk about the Remarkable Wrestling School that will be opening up potentially in St. James, and how to get in contact with them. Again, you can go to www.remarkablewrestling.com if you're interested in training to become a wrestler. A lot of good stuff on the horizon for Remarkable Wrestling, and I'm just very happy to be a part of the ride with such a talented crew of guys. It's just a great time. So, like I said, Steel Cage Warzone, I'm there right now having a blast, calling. We got 3 awesome matches. Only 3 matches in the card. Steel Cage Warzone, a 5-on-5 war game style match. Team Miracle from Above taking on Get Rich or Die Trying. And then, of course, all the titles on the line, by the way, in the Steel Cage Warzone match. So who knows what's even going on right now. Sure, it already happened by the time this is airing. I think the match has probably started. Yep, it did. And we also have crowning the first ever women's champion. And we have the 30-man Rumble. Winner goes to face Gabe Sky or Ken Broadway at Danger Zone 2. So, I mean, such an exciting night of wrestling. And that's pretty much all I got. I mean, at this point, next week, like I said, we have other visits to Tavern. We'll be airing it. I'm going to be interviewing probably this weekend Sean Knight from the Haven. He's a Connecticut-based wrestler. I'm going to be interviewing him. Next week, I have Zach Ramses as well. So those will be staggered out. I'm not sure when they're being released, but some of the audios are delayed. So I know Adonis Stone just dropped on Wednesday this week, but the audio was the last week. I mean, the video was last week. Audio is this week. So stay tuned for all those different interviews that are coming out. I appreciate the support. Just want to support independent wrestling. At the end of the day, it is the lifeblood of pro wrestling, so we can have moments like this in WWF 1998, because we're trying to recreate a new golden era of wrestling, and it is done throughout the indies. That's how wrestling is molded, crafted, shaped, all of that stuff throughout the independents. That's why it's so important to support them. Go out and support your local independent wherever you are. Find your local independent. Seek out those talent. Buy some merch at their tables. All of it goes such a long way. The passion of wrestling is at the grassroots level. Really, that's exactly where it is. Make sure you guys check out the remaining week of programming we have coming up, of course, building up towards Wrestling Tonight, Monday night. All your wrestling news. We're going to have all the stuff to break down, from whether it be AEW or New Japan Pro Wrestling, Great Muto's last match, all the good stuff to break down. Of course, Raw and SmackDown. The Rodown Boys are going to bring in that fire on WrestleMania season, as they always do, getting your fix of everything you need to go know about WWE. Fig Night's back. I'm sure the wrap-up was awesome this week. The flagship. We got the debate. I mean, what else can you ask for? You guys just go to the turnbuckletavern.com for all your needs. Make sure you subscribe. The Instagram's blowing up. I see we're above like 3,100 Instagram followers on Turnbuckle Tavern. If you're not following them, what are you doing? Follow at Turnbuckle Tavern. Chad and Sneed continue to crush all the content on there. I think it's mostly just Chad, the one bad Chad, but who knows? Maybe Sneed has some input on the Instagram, so I want to give him some credit as well. But been absolutely crushing it with the reels. And we're just, we're vibing here. We were the grind to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube was a little bit slower, but now that we've surpassed that 1,000 mark, it feels like the growth has been exponential. And I'm so excited to see what 2023 has in store for the Turnbuckle Tavern, especially throughout WrestleMania season. This is our biggest season. This is our Christmas season. It's a retail. Christmas is their boom season for wrestling podcasts and wrestling landscapes and wrestling media. WrestleMania is that season for us. Whether you're a WWE guy or not, WrestleMania is that boom for the year. And this is what we're looking forward to. It's a magical time of the year for wrestling. I mean, between all the bookings in LA, but also the collective for GCW. Obviously, people all circle that weekend on the calendar to go work, the independents in there. So all good stuff in the wrestling world. But I do appreciate you guys watching so much. I do appreciate Vic Venom stopping by and hanging out.
You want the dirt? Guess who? You want the dirt? Guess who's got the shovel?
Yes, Vic Venom, we do want the dirt. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. And if you listen just on Saturday, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go out there, tell some of them, and enjoy the rest of your night. We'll see you guys next week. Belcast will be with me, and we'll catch you next time. Shot Nostalgia. The DeLorean is pulling from the station. We'll catch you next week, guys.